Hey guys, my name is Frank, and this is the Python Programming video log, and today I'm going to show you how to make a very basic inventory system for a game. So I made this little example. I can move the player character around with the mouse or a touch event, that's actually a click event, and I can select these different items and put them in my inventory, which is this transparent white box up in the top right corner of the screen. So when my inventory is totally full, I can't pick up any more items. I just give them a little nice bounce effect there. I can remove items from my inventory to collect other items. And the cool thing about an inventory is once you have your item in the inventory, you can go ahead and move anywhere and use that item. That's why people put inventory systems in the game, so you can take items with you. So that's why they're desired. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the code. I'm going to take a look at the inventory class itself. The inventory class is controlling this box up here that you see, the white box. So here's my inventory class. It's going to have values to define the physical size, location, and color of the inventory, as well as variables that will hold these individual items. So the items array, for instance, is the array where I'm going to be storing these items. And all these items are basically the same. They just have different images associated with them. But for instance here, the inventory, it just has an X, has a Y, has a width and height, has a color. This is the color you're going to see, the transparent white. Items is the array where all these items are going to be stored. So I have an array of items that are physically on the map, that are being iterated through and drawn on the map. When I click on an item, that item is going to be removed from that array and put into this array right here. And that's basically all an inventory system is. You're just taking an item from somewhere and putting it into an array. And then you're going to use that array to access those items later. Columns equals 4. This is going to be the number of columns in my inventory system. So if I go ahead and pick up another item here, you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4 items, and there's one row, but 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. So columns is not only going to be the number of physical columns in my inventory system, but it's also going to be the maximum number of items I can hold. So if I try to pick up this little potion thing here, it's not going to go in because I have a little line that says if the array is equal to the number of columns, or the length of the array is equal to the number of columns, don't let anything else in. So that's going to be right here, the AddItem function of inventory. So AddItem is just going to take an item, and an item is going to be a sprite. So let's real quick just take a look at what a sprite is. This right here is the sprite class. It's literally just a position. That's going to be the physical position, the XY. It's going to have source X and source Y. That's going to be relative to the source position of the image inside of the tile sheet, as you can see here. And then it has width and height. So that's going to define basically the width and height of the shape. And that's all it is. It also has Vx and Vy because when I try to move an item or drop an item, it has that nice little tossing effect and it moves. So I have velocity X and Y in there to handle that little effect there. Collide point is just going to detect whether or not a point is inside of the rectangle region of the sprite. Collide rect is going to determine whether or not a rectangle of one sprite is colliding with a rectangle of this parameter sprite. So really simple rectangle collision code. I've covered it in other videos. Then update position is just going to basically take the velocity X and velocity Y and add them to the position of the sprite. And that's going to allow me to update its position on every frame and have it adhere to the boundaries of my little world. So gravity, friction, and collision with the floor are going to be applied to each object on every frame. So now that you know what a sprite is, let's see how we add a sprite into our items array inside of our inventory object. Very simple function, AddItem, takes a sprite, which is what we just looked at. It's one of these things on the screen. And if the items.length is equal to the number of columns, so if there are 4 items inside of my items array, then we're just going to take the sprite. We're going to say add -4 to its velocity Y. And that's why when I click this vial here, this little potion, it's going to jump up. It's going to have -4 added to its velocity Y, and it's just going to jump up. And I'm going to return false because I'm not going to add that item to my items array of my inventory. If the items.length, if the array's length is not equal to the number of columns in my inventory, meaning that I only have 3 items, I'm going to go ahead and say this.items.push sprite, and I'll actually collect it. So now let's take a look at add items and where it's used. So if I come down here past where I define my map and all my variables, all my objects, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to look and see where I'm actually adding items into the map, because there's another component to this that I want to take a look at here. Let's see, where is this? If I could just find it real quick. It is right here. Okay. Inventory.addItem. This is where I'm calling the function. When I add an item, I'm getting the item from this items array. This items array is what I'm looping through to draw all of these in the map items. So all the items that are on the map and actually in game are stored in this items array. Front index is just going to be the frontmost item. So let's say I drop all these at once in the same place. Obviously the skull is in the front, so I don't want to click this pile of objects here and get whatever item is in the back, like the chair, the red chair right there. I want to obviously get the skull, then I want to get the chair, then I want to get the bomb, then I want to get the sword. I don't want to start by getting the sword, then the bomb, then the chair, then the skull, because that's not what I'm looking at. I want to first get the skull because that's what's in the front. So that's all this does. The part that you need to take a note of is, didn't mean to go back like that. Part you need to take note of is items.splice. So what Splice does is it takes an item out of an array and returns it inside of another array. So basically, if I have an array that looks like, let's just do a quick example here. If I have an array and it looks like this, var a equals 1, or actually let's do a, b, c, and I do a.splice at index 1, and I'm going to remove 1, that's going to return an array that has b in it, because I'm going to remove one item at index 1 inside of the A array. So if I go to index 1 inside of the A array, that's going to be right here. That's going to be the B value. Now, if I were to specify 0 here, it would return an array with nothing in it, because I'm going to take 0 items out, which is kind of pointless, I think. But if I select 1, it's going to give me B, and this A array would just lose the B. That would just be gone. So that's basically what Splice does. So all I'm doing is when I'm adding an item, if this AddItem function returns true, then I'm going to splice an item out of the items array, the on-screen items, and AddItem is going to take care of adding that item to the items array of the inventory. So pretty simple there, just splicing an item out of one array and putting it into another array. Very simple. This code is very complex. I don't want to go over every little nuance of it because your inventory system would be different, but basically just keep in mind, splice it out of one array, put it into your inventory array. So now let's go back up and look at the other function of inventory, which is drop item. So drop item is going to take an index to drop at. So let's say this is index 0, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. If I want to drop item at index, or actually it would start at 0, so this would be index 0, 1, 2, 3. If I want to drop item at index of 1, that's going to be my chair, because, 0, 1, 2, 3. So 1 is going to be my chair. So when I click this chair, it's going to call drop item, and it's going to drop that item. I'm also handing in X and Y, so if you can guess based on where my item drops at, X and Y is going to be someplace right around here. So what happens is I'm getting the item, I'm setting this variable item equal to the inventory's items array at the specified index. So remember I said 1, now it's the sword. If item exists, meaning if I click here, obviously there's no item at that index. So if I'm setting item to the items array at index of 0, 1, 2, let's say 2, and I click there, item is going to be equal to undefined, because there's obviously no item in column 2. So if item, meaning I clicked on a space with an item in it, so let's go back to 1. If I click item in index 1, I'm going to click the sword, that item's going to exist. This is going to evaluate to true. This.items.splice, I'm using splice again. I'm going to splice at the index, which was, well, actually it's index of 1. But I'm going to splice at the sword's index. I'm going to remove one item. And index x, or item.x is going to be equal to x. And in this case, x and y is going to be equal to the x and y position of the top left corner of my player sprite, which is going to be right here. So I'm going to set items x equal to x. I'm going to set item y equal to y minus item.height. So that's going to be someplace like right about here. And then I'm setting its velocity x and y to some random value to make it kind of jump up. So it's going to appear right about here. Or actually, it's going to appear right about here. And it's going to fall kind of in some random direction. And that's pretty much exactly what happens. Cool. So let's see where drop item is actually being used. Let's go down, and this time I'm going to use find, Control F, drop item. All right, cool. So here is our drop item function call. I'm just saying, let's go through. I'm testing to see, is the pointer down? So when I click, I'm setting the pointer value for pointer.down equal to true, and inventory.items.length is greater than 0, meaning that if I'm clicking and the inventory has at least one item in it, because it would have to in order for me to remove an item from the inventory. If there's 0 or less items in the inventory, then this shouldn't even go on. And inventory.collide pointer, because the inventory is a rectangle and I've actually caused it to inherit the collide point function from the prototype of Sprite, that Sprite class I showed you. If inventory.collide pointer, meaning that basically if the pointer's x and y position is inside of this inventory rectangle, then I'm going to call this code. I'm going to set index equal to one of these 4 columns inside of here. The way I'm going to do that is just by saying get the pointer's x position inside of the inventory. I'm going to divide by the inventory's max width, its full width, divided by columns, which is going to give me the width of each column in my inventory box. And that's going to give me the index. So let's say my mouse is here. Actually, let's fill this with items so it's easier to understand. If my pointer x is in this range here, it's going to be at an index of 0. If it's in this range here, it's going to be at an index of 1. If it goes to this range here, it's going to be at an index of 2. Anything in this last range is going to be an index of 3. So that's how we're getting the index of the item to remove, with this line of logic right here. Then I'm going to say pointer x equals player.x plus player.width times 0.5. If I don't put this in, what's going to happen is when I click on the inventory, oh, actually, I got to refresh first. What's going to happen is if I click on the inventory, actually, let's see what happens. Yep, if I click on the inventory, the player is still going to move, which is not what I want. I want the player to stop moving when I click on the inventory. I don't want the player to actually move. It's kind of weird functionality there. Let's see if I go all the way over here. Yeah, see, sometimes when I click, it ends up moving. It's not what I want, so whenever I click the inventory, I'm setting the pointer's x position equal to the center of the player. This way the player just stops. So if I'm currently moving the player across the screen and I drop something, the player is just going to stop. Not the best, but this isn't really a game. It's just an example of how to build an inventory, so didn't really care about that much. So a little sloppy here, but whatever. Anyway, if I'm clicking on the inventory, I get the index of the position in the inventory box that I'm clicking on. I let the item equal inventory.dropItem at the index. So basically, I'm getting the item out of the inventory. If it exists, I'm going to set it at the player's x and y position, which is right here, the top left corner of the head. Then if the item exists, items.unshift items. So the items array is going to be the array of actual items on screen. So I'm just going to send the item to the very front of that on-screen items array. Pretty simple. So really all I'm doing for an inventory, and this is the only thing you need to know about inventories, you have an array for your inventory and you have an array for your on-screen objects. When you want to put an object in that inventory, all you do is splice it out of one array and put it into another. And when you want to put it back into the other array, you splice it out of the one array and then you put it back into the other. So splicing, unshifting, pushing, that's how you move items from one array to another. So pretty simple stuff. Anyway, I know I'm doing a pretty poor job of going into the details of the source code here, but there's a lot of source code, and I just kind of wanted to get this video finished with because I'm really interested in getting on to other stuff, to be quite honest with you. So if you're interested in the inventory system that I have here, please visit the link in the description and check out the source code. It's pretty good source code. Not commented super well or anything like that, but you can definitely use it to get a basic understanding of how an inventory system works. It looks complex, but really, it's mostly just drawing functions and looping through stuff. Your inventory class is going to have a basic look to it like this, but it's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple class. All this stuff down here is just logic and drawing and stuff like that, and you would get a feel for that when you're making your own game, so don't worry about this part too much. Just remember, splice out of one array, put into another array, and that's really all you need for an inventory. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you go use the source code and figure out how to make an inventory for your own game, because that's the goal of this, to help teach you guys, you know, some basic game programming stuff. Anyway, if you learned something, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to my channel for more videos, and I'll see you guys next time.